Good morning, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by Frazer Crone. Frazer, how you doing today?
Yeah, good mate, thank you. We were just saying after what could have on paper been a fairly quiet episode. We had Bellator and UFC from the weekend just gone, and then we've got pretty much exclusively the UFC next weekend. Despite that fact, there's plenty to talk about from Bellator especially, and there's some interesting takeaways from the UFC. So yeah, we might be able to pique your interest at some point throughout the podcast.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm like, you and I are actually so snobbish that there's other stuff of like, man, did Pat Barry groom the girl? What's next for Jorge Masvidal and Conor McGregor? Cain Velasquez might be getting out of jail. And you and I are just like, no, let's talk about the fights. Let's talk about the fights.
Yeah. There's plenty of news around MMA, but the fights, without the fights, you haven't got MMA, let's be honest. So without the controversy, you've got no talking points. So that's why I think I was just saying to you a second ago.
Yeah.
The controversy for me is the Bellator main event as far as the scoring is concerned. And yeah, I'm sure we'll go into detail on that shortly.
So Bellator had an interim welterweight champion with maybe their biggest name fighter in Michael Venom Page versus Logan Storley. I had heard this fight framed as the guy who can never get up from his back versus the guy who can never pass guard. And I thought I'll catch up on that later. Hearing the reviews on Twitter and stuff like that, I feel like I didn't miss out on anything. I think they put everybody to bed in London there. So tell us what happened. There's a major controversy coming out of this fight. Bring us up to date on what's going on here.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I was quite lucky. I finished work at 10 o'clock. I managed to get home. And by the time I showered and everything, I flicked on BBC iPlayer, which is obviously where Bellator is broadcast here in the UK. And it was, they were literally just facing off for the touch of gloves before the fight. So I was thinking, happy days. I've got potentially 5 rounds. I picked Page to win in under the 25 minutes. And then what played out was maybe, I can't say one of the most boring fights I've seen in a while, because Carlo Esparza and Rose Namajunas fought a little over a week ago. So that is now my benchmark for all things boring fight. But Logan Storley stalled the fight. He didn't look to ever win or finish that fight. And Michael Page, like you say, in the welterweight division across MMA, he's got that strange karate style, similar to Wonderboy Thompson, although I think he's a lot more explosive than Wonderboy Thompson. Wonderboy Thompson will throw the leg kick, he'll throw a lot more jabs, whereas you'll see Michael Venom Page dive in with almost like a Superman punch, or dive in with a quick 1-2. And it's just although it's the same style as Wonderboy, it's also a completely different style to Wonderboy, which is quite interesting. It seems they both come from that karate background. Mm-hmm. But, like you say, he's got a massive hole in his game, which he even, I read a short interview with him this morning that said, once I saw that hole in my game out, I will be able to, I will be one of the most dangerous men in MMA. How many fights does it take for you to have to sort that hole in your game out? Yes, he's only lost once, and it was by knockout, and it was that sort of freak kind of leg kick on the way back up. He was knocked out by Douglas Lima. Mm-hmm. But, he's 22 fights into his career now at 35 years old. You have to be asking the questions, how much longer has he got at the highest game? And to not figure out that is the hole in your game, and that's where you need to improve, and that's where you need to be. If I was Michael Venom Page, I'd have the best wrestlers in the UK start rounds with me on my back, and from now until this next fight, let's be honest, he's going to be given a gimme fight next. Yes, It was an interim title fight, but this is what Bellator do, especially with Michael Page. With the greatest of respect, he did coming off the loss to Douglas Lima before Richard Keeley, who was 3-1 at the time.
And these aren't good fights. He's lost in the biggest ones of his career. But yeah, that's always the line with him, is he's fighting cans, right?
Exactly, yeah. And you have got the fights in there against Ross Houston. You got the controversial split decision against Douglas Lima last, the fight before Logan Storley's.
Yep.
But even then, he was controlled he wasn't beaten on the feet; he was beaten on the ground, and that's where the split came from. Personally, I scored it 3-2 to Page, but I can even see a 4-1 to Page. And I've put in my notes here, you have to look at the unified rules of MMA. There's a 2019 document online which I'll send across to you, so you can link it in the bio if people want to go ahead and read that
down below.
But word for word, it said legal blows have to have an immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute towards the end of the match. In this case, Page's blows were having a cumulative impact on Storley. Storley wasn't throwing anything on the feet. He was throwing the odd leg kick, maybe the odd swinging overhand right that was miles away from landing, and was doing very little damage on the ground. Page was, if you look at Storley's face, you look at Page's face. I know that's not how we judge MMA fights, but Page won that fight if you just on a visual. Another point, successful execution of takedowns, submission attempts, reversals, and the achievement of advantageous positions that produce immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute to the end of the match. Did Storley ever actually look to end the match with his takedowns? No, he didn't look for any submit. There were submissions there that he could have at least tried. There was an arm triangle opportunity. There was a couple of times when he could have transition around onto the back of Page. Yes, it was difficult because they were doing a lot of the wrestling was up against, it was on the mat against the cage. But at no point did he actually look to contribute towards the end of the match as a result of his takedowns. Yes, he was getting the takedowns, but takedowns with no damage shouldn't be scored, in my opinion. There was
because it goes in priority. Even though you do get control with a takedown, control is after looking at damage scored. So this is the priority that you're listing. Even if you have control, you still have to look at who scored more damage first, control next.
Exactly. And, it says top and bottom position fighters assess more the impact or effective result of their actions more so than their position. So this is when we say, a fighter can win fighting off his back, and you can win a fight fighting off the back foot in the stand-up game. But if, let's say, taking, Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic from this weekend, Rakic won that second round because he took Blachowicz down and was doing effective damage and impactful damage. If Blachowicz was constantly throwing up submission attempts, was hurting Rakic off his back, that round would have gone to Rakic, despite visually Rakic being the fighter that was on top.
Right.
Storley was the fighter on top, but again, that also plays against Michael Venom Page because he wasn't looking to get up, to throw up submissions. He wasn't looking to land on Storley too much off his back, and he was just looking to get back to his feet, which is that getting up from having been taken down and getting up isn't scored. The benefit to that is that you get back into the area of the fight that you want to be, in Michael Venom Page's case, in the stand-up game. And then it says only when the sort of damage between the two men is equal. So, Page wasn't doing any more on the feet than Storley was doing on the ground. I'd argue that he was doing a lot more on the feet than Storley was doing on the ground. But should the next two criteria be looked at? Effective aggressiveness. Aggressively making attempts to finish the fight. And the key term is effective. So it's effective aggressiveness. You can't just be throwing out, if you land, for example, 100 jabs, but someone else lands 50 overhand rights that rock you every time. The 100 jabs do not count as much as the 50 overhand. Yes, you've landed double the amount of strikes. A classic example is Chito Vieira a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
He landed 112, 114 less strikes than Rob Font, but clearly won that fight because he had the more effective aggressiveness, the more effective strikes. Chasing opponent with no end result or impact should not render into the judges' assessments. That's word for word what it says in the unified rules. Storley wasn't being effective with his aggressiveness. He was just holding Page on the ground, just holding and looking to slightly advance his position. But even when he was able to advance the position, he didn't do any more damage with it. It was, yes, he was maybe going from, say, a half guard to full guard to half guard to full guard. But what was he doing with that? Absolutely nothing. I personally, I don't agree with this. The superior wrestler can win a fight by simply doing nothing and just lying on his opponent or her opponent. I don't agree that's why we all like Khabib so much, because yes, he was a wrestler that got his opponents to the ground, But what did he do when he was on the ground? He'd have the wrist. He'd look to look at the Edson Barboza fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he controlled him for the best part of 2 or 3 minutes per round.
Yep.
But look at the state of Edson Barboza's face after that. Yes, he wasn't maybe searching for the submission, but the damage, the effective damage that he was doing on the floor, the cumulative damage that he was doing on the floor, is what made him such an exciting ground and pound specialist. And that's what Storley wasn't doing. And then obviously the last fight area control. Fight area control is assessed by determining who dictates the pace of the fight, the place, and the position of the match. That was Logan Storley. But that's last. This will be assessed very rarely.
Right.
That shouldn't.
Nothing else, right?
So you could argue that the effective aggressiveness and the cumulative impact of blows and contribution towards the end of the fight wasn't there for either man. So the fighting area control may have come into play. But personally, I just don't agree. I think the impact that Page had on the feet, yes, it was maybe for 2 minutes of each round, and he's controlled for the final 3 minutes of each round. But the impact that he had on the feet was far more significant than the impact that Storley had on the ground. He was just stalling the fight until the end of the round or till the end of the fight in the fifth.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be against judges coming out and say, look, I scored that round. I scored rounds 4, 5, I don't know, 1, 2, and 3 for Storley because I felt that he did the better work on the ground. He was controlling Page on just some explanation from these judges so that we don't have these contentious decisions, so that we know, and that'll help us understand MMA better, because these are the rules. They're online for all to go and read. Like I said, we'll link it in the description below, so you can go. That's just one aspect of it, and there's far. It's a 13-page document that I had the pleasure of going through yesterday, which was quite enthralling on a Sunday morning, I say. But
it was more interesting than the fight.
Exactly, yeah. 13 pages of fairly small font, fairly small print size. Yeah, I was still more wide awake reading that than I was watching the fight itself. But yeah, I think the takeaway for me is that the work that Page did, even if it was for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes on the feet, was far more effective and far more had a more cumulative impact than Storley did. And Storley did control him for, in every round. I think apart from maybe the fourth round, it just appeared that Logan Storley kind of had the round off. But I just don't agree with the fact that he comes away with, especially. I don't know what happened there.
No, that's okay. Just keep going and I'll link it up.
Oh, nice one. Yeah, I just don't agree that he walks away with an interim title bout after doing what? Lying on your opponent for the best part of 15 minutes of a 25-minute fight. And, even Scott Coker, who, let's be honest, a direct quote is, you can't just lay on somebody. And when talking about the result, and, by the numbers, just looking on the Bellator 281 fight stats, 8 out of 16 takedowns. So he landed 50% of his takedowns. But if you look at, punches, Logan Storley landed 40 punches. Where were these 40 punches landed? And 29 out of 33 knees. Again, where? Kneeing Michael Venom Page in the legs, whilst you've got him in a clinch situation up against the fence. For me, it should almost be a whole, because total strikes, he landed 72 strikes. But for me, knees to the leg of Michael Venom Page are not cumulative and looking to actually end. He wasn't doing that looking to injure the legs of Michael Venom Page and render him, incapacitated for the fight. They were just sort of enough stalling tactics from Storley that he was able to, not have the position taken away from him, which, I just personally, I just leaves a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth that Storley, he's done himself no favors, in my opinion. He, are you looking to tune into the next Logan Storley fight? Because I'm not. I have no interest.
Oh God, no.
the next Logan Storley fight. Let's be honest, he hasn't done himself any favors, and we put out a poll on our Twitter. We got 272 votes. 51.8% of the people thought that Page won the fight, and 48.2% thought that Storley won the fight. That says it all. As to yes, it was a close fight. There's no denying that.
Yeah,
but who won? I can. It's one of those fights where you can say, yeah, it was definitely Storley's fight. He won it 4-1, maybe even 5-0. Yeah, Page did the more effective work. He won it 3-2 or 4-1. You could reasonably go either way. But if you look and go by the rules, sort of highest priority to lowest priority, the lowest priority is fight area control. You control where the fight goes. You control the pace of the fight and the position within the cage where it takes place. That is the last, final, and least important aspect. And it even says in the unified rule, this will be assessed very rarely. So you can't tell me that fight, unlike Rose and Esparza, was so uneventful that none of the other factors took place. That fight area control in the Rose and Carla fight, without doubt, came into consideration because nothing happened. You need another 4 or 5 criteria just to try and judge that fight because nothing happened. And yeah, for this one, I think, like I say, I'm not clambering to see the next Logan Storley fight, which will be against Amosov as and when he's ready to return and fight. But I think Amosov plays with him. It's the kind of.
Oh yeah, Amosov is good. Like, we know why there was an interim fight. It wasn't for Storley. Like, it wasn't for Storley in any way. That's not why. They can headline.
Keep Page active.
Yeah, and they can headline in London with him. He's a great name for headlining in London. They can sell out arena.
Doubt. And right? And I can see Michael Venom Page having one more if and when Logan Storley and Amosov fight. I think Amosov, like I say, plays with him. I can see Michael Page having one fight and then jumping straight back into a title shot against Amosov, because that's the fight we want to see. But as MVP alluded to, he has got that hole in his game, which unfortunately for Bellator is just a British thing. We had Paul Daley on the card.
Oh, before we jump down there, the two judges who chose it, it's a weird thing because Michael Venom Page did land like a litany of more strikes overall in the fight, and there were more significant strikes as well. So this is a weird thing to be finding when your CEO Scott Coker is saying MVP should have won. Things are going on. So the two judges that chose it for Logan, these are veteran judges. Brian Miner and Michael Bell have been judging MMA for more than 10 years. They've done a few hundred fights. They don't seem to be overly bad judges either. Like, there's a few decisions where you're like, I don't know what's going on there. Like, Michael Bell was the dissenter with Jake Collier versus Andrea Lees. That's not that big of a deal. That's not even a bad pick. He picked Ellie Zhang over Rose Namajunas. Again, like, that's not a bad decision. That's
no. These are reasonable fights. That is why you have 3 judges, because they can quite literally go either way on the night. And like you say, yes, they're not the consensus maybe with the Collier and Arlovsky and the Wiley Rose,
but that's fine. Those are close fights.
But no one's shouting robbery in those fights.
No,
this again. I'm not shouting robbery in this fight, but this is a far more close fight than those two, in my opinion.
Is it? Yeah, well, yeah, but yeah, that's the thing of like I feel like this conversation is like 10 years old, where we clearly established top position doesn't win you the round, or like just general control doesn't win you the round. We're still talking about it is the intent to trying to finish the fight, which is, like you said, why Khabib was so effective. He would just go from submissions to ground and pound constantly, just switch between the two. He was always aiming for the finish. You have to be trying to finish the fight. You can't just. Like Mr. Coker said, you can't just lay on top. I feel like this is such an old conversation. We've seen this before of like guys on the bottom will often win rounds. Since like 2015, we've seen this, right?
I mean, quite literally, I was just, flicking through our Twitter because I remember retweeting something from Shaheen Al-Shati, who obviously well-respected MMA journalist. I think he's at MMA Fighting now, or he has been for a few years. He tweeted, it ain't 2006 anymore. Wrestling with zero offense doesn't win fights.
Yeah. This conversation's old.
Because at the end of the day, you can get Jordan Burroughs could transition over to MMA and just do that to people all day, every day, and he wouldn't be a star.
No.
Kayla Harrison is taking down each and every opponent that she's facing.
Yeah.
But the cumulative damage that she's doing, the fact that she's constantly looking for a submission, some sort of lock, or at least looking to transition to get her opponent to expose himself. Michael Venom Page was not in any danger that entire fight as far as submission threat. Yes, he received a few strikes on the ground when they were down there, but none of them were sort of concussive shots. None of them were the Robbie Lawler, Ben Askren type sort of ground and pound. They were just shots for Storley to keep the position rather than to actually progress the position, look for a finish at all. And like I say, he's not done himself any favors with regards to actually. No one wants to see him fight again because, especially, what would a fight look like against a fairly elite striker who has far better takedown defense than MVP? Is Storley just getting pieced up on the feet? Because it's almost like the strikes thrown on the feet for Storley and landed on the feet for sure. Bellator, as far as getting hold of Bellator stats is concerned, it's near on impossible. UFC stats do a phenomenal job of the morning after they have the UFC stats up on the website in detail. Control round by round. Bellator stats you can't get hold of for love nor money, but.
Nope.
I'd be interested to see that the strikes landed on the feet by Logan Storley, or at least even thrown on the feet, because he wasn't even throwing. And what he was, leg kicks with no pace at all. And, what have we learned about Logan Storley as an MMA fighter? Very little. What have we learned about Logan Storley as a wrestler? I'd say we've learned very little because we knew that he was a phenomenal wrestler going into the bout. But I don't think we've learned anything about him as an MMA fighter, because what's his stand-up game like? We don't know.
Not good.
Who knows? Like, we don't know if he's improved from the Gracie fight. He's obviously got the split decision loss against Amosov back in 2020. Has he improved from that fight? Again, we don't know, because he just hasn't shown anything on the feet. And fair play. Yes, he's a far better wrestler than Michael Page. But I could have told you that if we knew the fight was going to go that way heading into the fight on Friday night. Well, it's going to be a test of whether Michael Venom Page can defend the takedown of Logan Storley. I would have said, we'll save us 25 minutes. He won't be able to defend every takedown of Logan Storley. It's what Storley can do on the ground.
Right, of course. Yeah.
We knew that Page was going to get taken down at some point. That's fact. It's like when McGregor faced Khabib. Every round starts on the feet. Okay, yes, but his takedown defense isn't great. He will be taken down. And that's what played out ultimately. And this is the same with Michael Venom Page. We knew that he was going to get taken down. It's his ability to get back to the feet and then capitalize on the fight when he was on the feet. And I thought he did that, but obviously the judges don't agree with me.
Well, and that's a really good example of changing meta in MMA that we've seen over the last 20 years, where guys, 15 years ago, you tried to defend the takedown, and if you didn't defend the takedown, you would try to work off your back. But now we see fighters like famously Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor just go ahead and take me down because I can get up. But I'm not going to work off my back. I know how to get up better than you know how to take me down. And that's kind of where the meta is right now. But that's been a massive change. But yeah, so the judge who chose Michael Venom Page maybe is controversial in MMA as the dissenter. He did pick Alexander Volkanovski over Max Holloway. Or sorry, no, other way around. Sorry. He picked Max Holloway over Alexander Volkanovski. I don't think that's a bad decision in any way. He seems like a pretty good judge, even if he's the dissenter there. That fight was hella close.
Again, yeah, I agree with that. Like you say, with the other two judges that picked Storley and picked Collier and picked Wally Zhang. We do see these judges, unfortunately, they've got different opinions on what wins a fight, which shouldn't be the case.
Which shouldn't be the case, yes. That's
they're unified rules for a reason.
Yeah.
They're not called make your own rules, but kind of stick to these rules, but have these rules in the back. Yes, everyone sees it from a different angle.
Yeah.
But they're unified. We should be getting, when you've got some judges, we see it quite often in MMA. One judge is giving it 30-26 to fighter A, and then another fighter is giving it 29-28 to fighter B. Well, how is that possible? How is that? Or you gone 30-27 one way and 30-27 the other. That shouldn't be happening, because it should be clear and obvious who wins what round. Even for close rounds, it should still be fairly clear and obvious. Whereas clearly it's not. That's not the case. And like you say, these judges are. It's not the. You get it far less in MMA than you do in boxing, where Canelo, you need to knock Canelo out to get a draw, which obviously isn't quite the case against Bivol, but previously that was the rhetoric. You have to knock, especially in Vegas, you have to knock Canelo out to get a draw. The Adelaide Bird card on the first Golovkin fight was embarrassing, and yet, she continues to get work, and you get it a lot less in MMA, where you get these outright robberies.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, you get controversial decisions. The Rosa Esparza fight was a controversial decision.
Sure.
But that fight is also, there's an asterisk next to that fight, because that wasn't a fight. That was two women sort of just having a bit of touch sparring with each other. But, it's overall, I think if this was a UFC event, it would be getting far more eyes. But because it's a Bellator event at a non-friendly time for the US market, because it was based out obviously based in London at an appropriate time for ourselves. Yeah. And there was far more talking points other than the main event. I think there was at least two, maybe even three bigger talking points than the main event.
But I will throw in one more thing. It's not, people always talk about like the system, the 10-9 system, and like maybe we do half points or maybe we do something else. It's not that. It's the judges. Who cares what the system is? We're just saying it could be like green lights, red lights. This guy won the round. That's all we're trying to say. You know what I mean? But that's not where judges are even agreeing. They're not agreeing on who won the round. I don't care if you're doing half points, whole points, you're doing some other weird shit. The judges aren't agreeing. They don't know what they're seeing is the problem. It's the people who, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And you get people, I was sort of tweeting out from the MMA Sucka account and out from my personal account whilst the fight was going on.
Yeah.
And someone came back like, how can you possibly think that over the 25 minutes Page won that fight? I was like, what? That's not how we're not judging a 25-minute fight. Sure. We're judging five fights and accumulating that at the end. We're judging round one and then once round one scores are in, we forget about what happened in round one. Round two, we forget about that. Round three, we forget about that. We're not thinking, well, Page was controlled a lot in round one, and then he did quite well in round two, and then three was close, but maybe because Storley was more dominant in round one than Page was. No. Each round is 5 minutes, and then we put it to the back. We're not judging when it gets to round five, and I think about the fight overall was close. Let's go back and look at round one. No, round one is done. That's because you will be swayed by what else has happened in the fight. You're judging it round by round, not as a fight as a whole. And to your point, why aren't we having? What's wrong with having 5 judges?
Absolutely, 100%. I agree.
7 judges, or obviously it has to be an odd number, because otherwise you'd have, let's say you had 10 judges, 5 score it for one, 5 score it for the other. We get a lot more draws and a lot more sort of inconsistency. So 5 judges, or even 5 judges spread equally around an octagon. There's 8 sides to an octagon. 5 judges spread equally around.
Sure.
And then you leave a big space where the commentators are, so they're not swayed by what the commentators say. They need sound cancelling headphones, so they're not swayed by the fans. They don't even, to be honest, they don't even need to be in my opinion, they don't need to be in the arena itself. They could be out the back watching it and say, can I have angle 1 on this screen, angle 2 on this screen, angle 3 on this screen? There's hundreds of cameras at a live Bellator, live UFC event.
Mm-hmm.
And in that 1 minute in between rounds, they can say, right, can I just see that sequence again? Was it a knockdown or was it a headbutt, for example? That's and then okay, it was a headbutt, and it was Carl Dawkins and Kevin Holland. That fight ended in I think Dawkins ended up getting the victory, and then it was overturned to a no contest because Holland obviously was sort of knocked out from the headbutt.
Right.
But after the round, you could say, right, can I just quickly double check? I've made a note. It's 2 minutes 30 in the fight. I need to see if that right hand landed, or was it a slip, for example? And then you just get the contentious sort of out of the way a little bit, and there's a lot less. Oh well, the judges were definitely swayed by the British fans booing Logan Storley for stalling the fight and not doing anything. Well, how could they be? Because they're out the back. They haven't got any. They're sat in silence watching you're not impacted by the fans. You're not impacted by the potentially by the commentators, and especially at the UFC Apex. I know obviously we're talking about Bellator, but at the UFC Apex, you've got next to no fans. You've got maximum 40-50 fans in the if that in the arena.
Yeah,
the judges are sat in close proximity to the corner teams.
Yes.
Now, if I'm Alexander Rakic, who's barely landed a right hand, it's just sort of gone off the chin of Jan Blachowicz, but my team's going crazy. Say, yeah, great shot. That landed. It always wobbled. The judge is thinking, oh, well, they've got a slightly different angle. Okay, I'll maybe mark that down as a significant strike, potential fight-ending strike for Rakic. You're influenced by what's around you, especially in the Apex.
Absolutely.
So stick them out the back, stick them in a private sort of business suite, and say, look, you have an option of 3. We've got 10 cameras here. You've got an option of 3 that you can have on 3 different screens.
Yep.
Score the fight, and it will be, we'll have an official person here to take the scorecards. Obviously there'll be some sort of logistics, since I'm not paid enough to just sort those logistics out for Dana White and Scott Coker. But that way you eradicate any. He was influenced by the crowd. He was influenced by the referee stepping in to stand them up when he was actually doing work, for example. Influenced by what the referee's saying. These people are only human. They can only. They're not actively being influenced. Oh well, the corner team said that definitely landed, or the corner team says that he's tired, or the corner team is saying that he's hurt. Well, that's potentially not the case, but they're just it's almost like osmosis. They're just taking that in from the crowd booing because the hometown favourite's on his back, and the referee stands him up, and the corner team saying what they're saying, and you are influenced by the pull of a Conor McGregor against a Cowboy Cerrone, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Every shot that Conor lands has a potential to knock his opponent out, whereas a lesser heavy-handed hitter could be landing a similar impactful shots as McGregor.
Yeah.
And yet, because the crowd isn't going crazy, in a main event, people are going to be more pumped up for a main event than they are for the first fight on the prelims. That doesn't say that a strike from a main event fighter shouldn't be counted exactly the same as a strike from a guy, where there's no one in the crowd. But because the crowd don't go crazy, because the corner team maybe doesn't, act as animated as a corner team for a main event fighter, that strike may not be scored as impactful, which, like I say, just stick the judges in the back and eradicate all those potential issues.
And I think it feels so weird to have this conversation again and again and again, but so much of what we do is because, well, that's tradition and that's what we've been doing for 70 years. Like we were talking about weights last week. I'm like, that's just how we've been doing it. Yeah. 3 judges who sit cage side, that's just how we've been doing it since all of history. Why would we change it? Well, the people who invented the sport, if they had access to VAR and instant replay and stuff like this, maybe they would have done that sort of thing. And you see this a lot in baseball as well. And especially with the slow uptake of VAR in league football, of well, that's kind of just how we do it. Some umpires are going to see different things. No, it's not. You're not well, we're going to change how we're playing based on how crappy the umpire is. No, what are the rules? If the people who invented the sport had access to these kinds of things, they absolutely would have wanted to do it because they were trying to enforce the rules. They're not enforcing the rules based on unless the person sees something else otherwise. You know what I mean? Put 3 guys cage side, 4 in the back in some soundproof room. Why not? I don't know. So do something different. Try it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think who was it? It was it Invicta that were trying out the open scoring a few months ago? So I know a fairly major promotion was trying out the open scoring to say, your fighter is, the judges have scored it, your fighter is 2-0 down. They have to go out now and finish that, finish the fight. Why not just try that out to see if you get a more interesting final round?
Sure.
In each and every fight, if a fight is 2-0 down, they'll go out looking for the finish. If a fight is 2-0 up, they'll know that they need to they need to, maybe get on their bike, but they know that their opponent's going to be coming at them. Mm-hmm. If the fight's 1-1, each person is going to go out there and put it all on the line and look to get their hand raised. And if MVP knew that he was potentially when it was potentially 2-2, how would that have changed the fight going into the final round? We'll never know. But going forward to the UFC, Caitlin Chikagin and Amanda Hebas, that final round would have been, it was a great final round anyway. It would have been a far more interesting final round if each girl knew that, it's potentially 1-1, I'm down, she's down on one other card. And I think it would just make for more interesting fights. But unfortunately, I don't think the open scoring, especially, is going to be a thing in MMA for a number of years.
I completely agree with you, but let's move forward because the Bellator card also had some real sad fight and a real good fight as well. Let's start with the sad one because we never like to see Lyoto Machida lose, an absolute legend, a guy who kind of, I don't know what to say. He's one of the most, he kind of advanced how good striking was in MMA for that era. But yeah, seeing him get knocked out just feels sad in my heart. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And I looked at his record and thought, how would Bellator measure the success of having a former UFC light heavyweight champion? I know that he then competed for the middleweight championship and then competed again for the light heavyweight. How would they? Yeah, he's coming off the big front kick to Vitor Belfort in his last ever UFC fight. I believe that was in Brazil. So it's, how would they assess the success of his transition over? We're comparing it to Michael Chandler. That's money. He's 2-2 in the UFC, but are you tuning in to see a Michael Chandler fight next? Absolutely. Yeah. With Lyoto Machida, is it a success? Well, if you look at the guys he's beaten Rafael Carvalho, it's a split decision in his debut, and then Chael Sonnen. And then the guys that he's lost to, Gegard Mousasi, split decision. That is aged quite well because Mousasi's still looking like a killer. Phil Davis, split decision. Ryan Bader, unanimous decision loss, and now he's being knocked out by Fabian Edwards. If I was Scott Koch, I don't think maybe the transition of Machida from sort of UFC, he's coming off two victories. Yes, it's a split decision, but a split decision victory, and then that front kick to the face. They signed him when he was 39, so he's never going to be the sort of poster boy for Bellator. No, but after getting knocked out by, no disrespect to Fabian Edwards, but getting knocked out by Fabian Edwards is probably not where let's be honest, he's a legend of the sport, and he's not where a legend of the sport like Lyoto Machida wants to be. It's like you say, it was tough to see because he didn't even look in the, yes, the fight ended in a round, but he didn't even look like vintage Machida or look like he was ever gonna. Edwards is too big, too young, too quick, and too powerful for him, unfortunately, and obviously that played out in the result.
Yeah, and I think also Machida needs to look at, he's not landing stuff from the open, but he's getting in trouble in the clinch where when he was in his prime, nobody could even, the only person who could touch him in the clinch was John Jones. And now you got this guy beating you up in the clinch. This is you can visually see that he's not where he was.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, it's upsetting to see, but it kind of is what it is. What do you expect from a 43-year-old guy that's been knocked out multiple times? He's gone through some wars in his time. He's been choked out, obviously, by John Jones. That that brutal guillotine choke where he just let him go and walked off. One of the most iconic submissions. Yes, it's not the best submission, but one of the most iconic submissions in UFC MMA history. Yeah. But I want to see Lyoto Machida fight one more time against a Bellator type opponent where he is just going to be getting a gimme. Let's be honest, Bellator are in the business of feeding fairly poor fighters to guys that they want to get wins, and do that for Machida.
Speaking of feeding poor fighters to fighters that they want to get win, Paul Daley got a great retirement knockout victory here. Now, Paul Daley, we throw legend around a lot because there's only 5 words in MMA, and Legend is one of them, but like he is
Pioneer being another one, and he is very much a pioneer as well.
He's a veteran. He's been in there with like Scott Smith, Nick Diaz. He was fighting like Pat Healy back in the day, Josh Koscheck, Jake Shields in Elite XC. Like he's been around forever, and I'm not sure that he ever improved. I'm not sure that he ever got better, but he had a really good left hook and a lot of power. And in this fight, you can see him win. This is officially right hook knockout, round 2. This is his retirement, and good for him. It's about time he retired.
Yeah, for sure. This is the most Paul Daley fight in his last fight that he was out wrestled in the first round. He was getting out wrestled, and then he just sits back and relies on that brutal one punch power that he's got, that we know that he's had since he's fought in Cage Warriors, Bama, Strikeforce. Obviously, he had the UFC, he had a strange UFC career being cut from the UFC. Yeah. Obviously, Bellator, Elite XC. That fight against Nick Diaz, and I was looking at his record. He's got 35 knockouts in 44 wins.
That's pretty good.
Appreciated power, which at a welterweight where it was just the most Paul Daley fight. He was out, like I say, he was out on his back, probably arguably even a 10-8 in the first round because he did nothing in that first round really.
Yeah,
and then he manages to get taken down in the second round. Gets back to his feet, uses that Paul Daley power, Semtex power, and gets a knockout. And Paul Daley is what he is. He'll go down as without doubt, a British MMA. And I know you said we throw around, but he is a British MMA legend.
Yeah.
And to have fought in Cage Warriors and Bama when Bama was a thing. Stalwart in Strikeforce. He did have fights in the UFC. He's now, he's fought for Bellator for a good few years now. He's without a doubt going to go down as a pioneer of British MMA, coming the roughhouse days with Jim Moorhead and Dan Hardy. And, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him become sort of like maybe, how they had Peter Queeley on the commentary or on the sort of analysis side. I think Paul Daley, as far as analysis goes, he's got nothing to add to the wrestling analysis, but stand-up analysis, I think Paul Daley is a recognisable face for Bellator and would do well in that sort of realm going forwards. I think that would be a good, you don't want to see Paul Daley taking crazy, random boxing fights on small shows. Now you want to see him retired from combat sports, and hopefully he's got the right people around him to make sure he does stay retired.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with you. He does deserve all the praise that he gets because he was doing MMA. It was especially hard in the UK before it was accepted. Like in the US, it kind of became accepted around that time. But even like it's only just become kind of a thing in the UK in the last 5 or so years. He was out there well before then doing MMA, doing kickboxing, stuff like that, where nobody else was doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he is the most British MMA fighter that I think we've ever seen. Yeah, he's got that raw power. But his wrestling game is awful and always has been. And I think that's the problem with his teammate back in the day, Dan Hardy. Pretty average wrestling, very good stand up. Darren Till, fairly decent, pretty good stand up, pretty poor wrestling. Michael Bisping, pretty poor wrestling, pretty decent stand up. There's a theme going here, and
there is
maybe the poster boy for absolutely. He was out wrestled by MVP, who we've just said has next to no wrestling game. And but he sat back and relied on that power, and it's got him to 44 big wins with 35 big knockouts. And he's competed for Bellator titles. He's competed for various titles. He never quite got the to the title in the UFC because of because he was out wrestled by Josh Koscheck, and then got too frustrated. But his UFC record obviously stands at 2-1, 2 first round knockouts, including a knockout against Martin Kampmann. Which
that was a good one.
That a knockout against Martin Kampmann doesn't do your sort of credibility any misjustice. He's a phenomenal stand-up striker, and Daley slept him. So but if you look down his losses, John Fitch, Rory McDonald, Douglas Lima, and Tyron Woodley. That Nick Diaz fight was phenomenal, and Josh Koscheck. These were all wrestlers. Jake Shields, Nick Thompson back in the day. These guys are all wrestlers, and these are all guys that he's lost to as a result of the wrestling. Now, if you look at the stand-up fighters that he's fought, Lorenz Larkin, Eric Silva, Sadawad. He's knocked all these guys out or at least beaten these guys. So I think he's a kickboxer that likes fighting in 4-ounce gloves rather than an MMA fighter, in my opinion. But Paul Daleys obviously made enough money now that he can sort of ride off into the sun. And with a record of 44 and 18, I think he would do it. Like I say, I hope he's got the right people around him to put that sort of combat sports career on hold.
I think you're absolutely right that he's a kickboxer, or maybe just found more money in MMA or something like that. But yeah, he's absolutely a kickboxer. Paul Daley, Alina Kolindu got a good TKO win, so it's good to see her keep getting wins because I think she's underrated. What else did you see on this card that you liked before we move forward?
It's just, I think we've got the next competitor for Liz Carmouche's card in Kanawatabe. Carmouche did defeat her in her last fight, but there's nothing else in the Bellator 125-pound division. Obviously locked in that triangle choke in the second round. I think that's going to be what's next. The Bellator, the flyweight division, is equally, or if not more, stale than the UFC featherweight division, and that's saying something massive.
Yeah, Denise Kielholtz. I mean, she's a really good kickboxer. Just like we were talking about, I'm like, man, it's really hard to transition to MMA, and like you saw the difference of like Kana can't strike, Denise can't wrestle, so like that's exactly it. We also had a really, really just amazing. No, I don't know what to say on this. It's just a weird fight. Blachowicz versus Rakic. Rakic blew out his knee, so it's a TKO victory. But like, what did we see leading up to that? There's no one else in this division of like, do you want to see him back in a title shot? Well, there's no one else. There's no
exactly. Yeah, it was disappointing into the fight because the fight was fairly decent. I think it was 1-1. I think Jan won the first round despite getting the cut underneath the eye within the first 10 seconds. But he was eating up that leg of Rakic with the low kicks, and I didn't quite realize. We need to put some respect on Blachowicz's name for his leg checking ability.
Yeah, that's one of his best talents.
Every single leg kick that Rakic was throwing was being checked.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't being sort of lifted out, he was, stamping down and turning the shin out. Yeah. It was really, really, really good. I think that maybe even played a factor in blowing out the knee, perhaps. If you put in a lot more weight on, if your lead leg is mashed, and you're putting a lot more weight on your back leg.
Yeah.
And you're not used to doing that in training, perhaps that had an impact, But
yeah, it's weird because remember when they used to have fighters walk into the cage and they had like 3 strengths? They don't do that anymore. But like Blachowicz would have been leg kick defense, which is a weird strength. I don't think anyone has had that before, but it is a strength of his. It's maybe his best talent.
Yeah, for sure. And you say it's his best talent, which I completely, his stand-up game is his best aspect, despite being a black belt. He's, Glover dominated him on the floor. Rakic dominated him in the second round on the floor. Gustafsson back in the day dominated him on the floor, and it's pretty rough for Blachowicz, in my opinion, if he gets taken down. And I think, like you say, he's probably going to be next for the 275 main event,
something like that.
I've got no real interest in seeing Blachowicz versus Glover 2.
No, I don't care. This is not.
But who else is there? The winner of Anthony Smith versus Ankalaev. They don't fight until much later on in the year. So,
I'm hoping Jiri does, because Jiri's an exciting fighter that I get excited to watch. Like I like watching Jiri fight, so I hope that he becomes champion and is able to win because he's fun. And there's not a lot of, even though the division is kind of thin, it's also not that interesting. Like there's not a lot of fun action fighters in it.
Exactly, yeah. And I'll be for 275. I'll be doing a keys to victory. Probably, I've been looking at a few fights. Probably going to do it for Glover because I imagine, I haven't looked at the odds, but I imagine he'll be the underdog going into the fight because he's the underdog going into every fight. But
yes.
The thing is with Jiri Prochazka is, if you watch his 2 UFC fights, he's not good defensively. He just gets jabbed in the face, and I'll allude to it in my article, but I also hope that he becomes champion in a way. No disrespect to Glover, but we know what Glover's going to do. He's got fairly decent boxing, and he's going to look to take you down and kind of, maul you when you're down there. With Jiri, what is he going to do? Your guess is as good as mine, but can he knock you out we've seen spinning elbows, we've seen the knockout of Ozdemir as well. Can he get knocked out? You know, if that style with his chin high up in the air is anything to go by, he's on a swift path to CTE. You know, he's on his way to being knocked out. And I think, you know, if someone like Ankalaev gets his hands on him, or Blachowicz manages to land on him, I think he probably goes out, because he has that fighting style of hands down, looks to use his reactions, but he looks to use his reactions, and he's not actually that good at actually defending the shots. You know, Dominic Reyes landed and wobbled him. Ozdemir landed on him. So,
yep.
It's that'll be an interesting fight for sure.
I'm looking for. It's really a matter of who, gets there first, because I think Prochazka has negative like wrestling, grappling talent of like Muhammad Lawal, way undersized, was out wrestling him. Vadim Nemkov way out wrestled him until Vadim got tired, basically. But like he's not a talented counter wrestler in any way. But if he lands, he can win. But if he doesn't land, I don't know. It's a fun one. We'll talk about that one later. But anything else on the UFC card that was kind of notable? Like Ryan Spann got a win over.
Ryan Spann, Davey Grant, and Michael Johnson all got good finishes. I thought Chikagian looked really good. I actually picked her to finish the fight, which, you know, she's never done in the UFC, and I don't know why I picked her to finish, but I just thought, you know, it's about time that she stepped up and did get the finish against a smaller girl. She was landing a lot with power and stopped a lot of what Ribas was looking to do to her on the ground. She's easily the second best fighter in the world, but she's worlds apart from Shevchenko. We saw that in their fight. She called again for the winner of the fight, or she said, you know, Manon Ferrot in Paris, for me, I think that's September time.
That's good. That'd be fun.
That's next for me. I think that's the fight to make. And I don't want to put too much emphasis on it, because I think the guy's scum, but Andrea Lees cornerman Tony Kelly's comments about Brazilians, for me, it's got no place in the sport. What that added to his advice for Andrea Lee is redundant, in my opinion. It didn't add anything. It didn't, you know, she's saying, oh, you know, she eye gouged me, or she grabbed my glove or whatever. Well, Andrea Lee grabbed the fence, so, you know, you don't see the opposition corner, you know, go in on the filthy American or anything like that. Doing that. And, you know, Tony Kelly's come out and say, oh, you know, cancel culture is real, but just come out and apologize, saying, you know, I got caught up in the moment, and I shouldn't have said anything. I want to apologize to, I can't remember who it was Andrew Lee for. I keep on having Talia Santos in my head, but I think that's the girl.
Vivian Araujo.
Yeah, that's right. Santos is the one that's fighting Shevchenko in a few weeks, isn't she? So yeah, just come out and say, you know, I mean, no disrespect to her and her team, and, you know, congratulations on a good victory.
Exactly. Of like, I was kind of it's the weird thing of like, you did throw Brazilians under the bus, which you didn't have to do, but
it's not in the Chael Sonnen way of trying to hyper fight, and we know that Chael didn't really think it. No, let's be honest, it was a pro wrestling line. Tony Kelly, there seems to be some animosity there, and this is on the back of Andrea Lee having, is it a husband or ex-husband or one of her cornermen having a swastika tattoo in one of her early UFC fights. From what I remember, I don't want to speak out of line, but I'm pretty sure that was I don't know why I've got that in my head. So just pick your cornerman, really. But, you know, I've just written in my notes, let's hope Adrian Yanez just knocks him out cold in June, and maybe then he'll wake up and apologize ever so slightly for his.
I doubt it. I bet it's the opposite. I bet he doubles down if he gets knocked out by a Brazilian. He's gonna be like, "Look how he cheated."
Exactly. Yeah, I'm hoping. Yeah, maybe I even, you know, low level hope Adrian Yanez has to pull out the fight. He gets put in a fight against a Brazilian, and the Brazilian knocks him out, or something to that effect. For me, there's no place there's no place for that.
But yeah, coming up, I don't know if there's anything else on the card you want to cover off.
No, Maximov got choked out in a little over a minute or 2 minutes, which, and Jake Hadley looked disappointing. You know, 8-0 coming from the UK. The Cage Warriors flyweight champion was dominated throughout, 30-27 on all scorecards, and that's you know, he missed out on fighting in March in London. He'll probably miss out on fighting in July in London as well now. So not really sure what will be next for Jake Hadley. Let's just hope that it doesn't deteriorate too much from his career, because he is good, and I do think he's got a future in the UFC, but not on the performance that he showed at the weekend. It was pretty poor.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I know. There wasn't much else there. This weekend we got a pretty. It looks honestly on paper it could be a very entertaining UFC card without any name power. I'll quickly throw in one championship on Friday. We'll have 2 Muay Thai title fights in the first round of their Muay Thai Grand Prix. So if you're in that's like it's going to be a really good Muay Thai card. UFC this weekend. Holly Holm, Caitlin Vieira, Santiago Ponzinibbio, and Michael Pereira is going to be a lot of fun. Chidi and Njokuani is going to be a lot of fun. Polyana Viana and Tabitha Ritchie. Eric Anders is back. There's potential for a lot of fun on this card.
Yeah, for sure. I think Holly Holm versus Caitlin Vieira is a good fight. I like Holly Holm. I like watching her fight because lately she's shown a much more willingness to press her opponent up against the cage when she is in trouble on the feet. Against Irene Aldana, that's what she did for pretty much 25 minutes and then was just opening up. I think Holly Holmes is going to be too good a striker for Caitlin Vieira. She's too good a defensive wrestler these days as well. She's not being taken down as much in her most recent fights. When she is being taken down, she's nullifying anything that her opponents throw. Raquel Pennington and Aldana were able to do very little to Holly Holm, in my opinion, either on the feet or be it on the ground. I think this probably determines the next bantamweight title contender after Pena and Nunes fight it out on after TUF concludes. They'll obviously have their rematch. I think this probably determines the next striker. The next contender, and that's all you need to know really about the bantamweight division. But yeah, I agree with you. I think as far as star power on the card, Holly Holm is the name. I imagine we'll see that Ronda Rousey knockout 7 or 8 times on the broadcast. Santiago Ponzinibbio returns against Michelle Pereira. That's gonna be fun. That's 2 strikers. No one, if the takedown's landed, it's because someone's panicking after being caught. And I think outside of that, it's pretty thin on the ground. But this is what happens with the UFC. They put a pretty thin card out, and then it absolutely delivers.
Yes,
so be sure to tune in. This weekend, the Blachowicz Rakic card started off fairly slow. There were a lot of decisions on the card, and then it just seemed to, aside from the main event that had the disappointing finish. On the main card, you had Hadley being dominated, but you had knockout, and then you had fight of the night, Caitlin Chikagan. David Grant's fight with Lewis Schmoker was a really good fight, and then Ryan Spann versus Iron Kutalaba. They looked like they were about either man could have landed and knocked each other out, and then Ryan Spann jumps on the neck. And yes, the Blachowicz Rakic, the finish of that fight was a little disappointing, but up until that point, it was a good fight. I enjoyed the fight. It wasn't a boring light heavyweight fight with 2 men just looking to land on each other. There was danger for each man. The leg kick, the takedown, the fact that Jan Blachowicz was doing that sort of hook uppercut left to the body with the overhand right was and was landing on Rakic multiple times. I think it was a good fight. So I think this card will be the same. Be sure to tune in because it's one of those where yes, it hasn't got all the names that it hasn't got the Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler on the card. No, but I almost guarantee that it'll deliver some crazy finishes.
Yeah, it's going to have some sick stuff on there. Chase Hooper's down on the undercard. Like you said, Ponzinibbio, Pereira's is going to be weird as hell. Chidi Njokuani is just chaos whenever he fights as well. It's going to be fun as hell. But yeah, let's get out of here for the week. What are you writing this week? What can we look forward to?
I'll be looking at some breaking news points. I'll be keeping an eye on... we've got an Eagle FC card with Junior Dos Santos facing Jorgen De Castro, and there's plenty of other UFC, Roosevelt Roberts, Hector Lombard are both on the card, so that's something to keep an eye on, Eagle FC. I think that's on maybe... on Thursday or Friday. Okay. That's on Friday, and obviously that's Khabib's promotion. And Gervonta Davis returns this weekend just in time for him to put his name back in the hat for the Kambosos Devin Haney fight. And I think that's the 5th of June. So that's what 2 or 3 weeks away. If he gets a big victory, his name's straight back in that hat in that absolute killers division. So be sure to if you're in the UK, probably wake up on Sunday morning and see Tank Davis. If he's clever, he'll come in bang on championship weight. He'll get a big, hopefully for him, he'll get a big finish, and he'll be saying, right, no questions, I will be in Australia in 3 weeks. ringside for Devin Haney versus George Kambosos. And I will get in the ring and I will be fighting the winner of that fight, no questions asked. But we know with Tank, he'll probably miss weight, he'll cruise to a boring victory, and he won't even pass comment on the fight, unfortunately. But let's hope he does, because that division, you've got everyone in that division can beat everyone in that division, and it's a phenomenal. We've had Ryan Garcia come back, we've got Lomachenko on the brink still. Who was obviously meant to be fighting Kambosos, but with everything going on in Ukraine, and we've still got, the forgotten man, Teofimo Lopez. Yes, he lost to Kambosos, but he could beat Kambosos tomorrow, and he could beat Devin Haney tomorrow. But he could also lose to both, like he did in the original fight between himself and the Aussie Kambosos. So let's not forget about Teofimo Lopez, who has been set out for a while, but
it's a fun division.
It's in my opinion, it's the best division in boxing at the moment. It's one falls out, Devin Haney jumps in. That's for that to happen is it's got me excited for sure.
Well, let's get out of here for the week. We look forward to it. Frazer, thanks so much for your time, sir.
Likewise, mate. Cheers.